Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holtz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet from me, Andrew. Welcome.
Hey, man. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Excited to chat and get to know you a little better. You're actually not the first Andrew who's been on E-Commerce Conversations, so why don't you go ahead and say which Andrew you are and what the heck you do?
Sure. Yeah, Andrew Foxwell. I run a paid social agency, Foxwell Digital. I have a paid social community, or really digital marketers, actually, not just paid social, called the Foxwell Founders. We've got about 440 members now from 25 countries, spending $200 million a month on average on Meta ads. But we talk about CRO and Google and TikTok and Pinterest and all that as well in there, and running your agency. And yeah, that's me, and that's what we do. I've been doing Facebook ads since they were invented. So there you go. So now I'm hashtag almost 40 is what that means.
Well, you know, I got you beat by a couple of years. So
all right, word up.
It only gets worse from here, I'll tell you that.
Perfect.
Well, I want to get in kind of selfishly, pick your brain about some strategies and some theories when it comes to building a team for paid marketing. If you're not familiar, Beard Brand's not historically been really strong at paid acquisition. We kind of lean on our organic channels and we do that fairly well, but paid's been challenging. And I'm not like the analytical kind of guy. Like, I'm curious, what type of person is generally going to be successful running paid marketing campaigns? Like, what attributes are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is different now than it was a few years ago. I think that, and we'll talk about those differences. I've always been a believer that the person that's good at paid social that you can hire is somebody that is ambitious and that is green and probably doesn't know a ton about it. I think that there's a bias that many of us that have been in the industry for a long time have, or people that have, let's say, 2 years of experience on paid social. They think, well, I crushed it for these 5 brands or whatever, and immediately I should be paid $200,000 to do this, right? Because reality is, like, the landscape is such that you could go out and start your own freelancing agency and do that, and you could be successful at it if you were good at it, right? So that makes that tough. I think that finding someone that's hungry, that wants to learn, and has a perfect mix of analytical thinking, constant curiosity, and some sort of creative background. I think the third part is the one that's different than what it was a couple of years ago, is going to be better as a fit for now. So somebody that, I mean, I've been doing this like forever, like I said, and there are really no best practices. There are things that we would generally do, but I learn new stuff literally every day. So you have to be curious and you have to always be asking, like, but why would you do it that way? Or, I mean, I think there's a fine line between challenging the status quo and like just being a jerk, but like the curiosity of like learning and understanding the different ways to approach something. So those I think are probably the best. And I think, of course, just like any job right now, not only communicating, but being able to communicate well in an electronic format is really crucial, because a lot of people are in disparate places in the world. I have a team member and she never doesn't send me a video note in Slack, and it's not written. They're always, hey, how's it going? What's going on? I just wanted to tell you what I'm up to. And I see her face and it's like totally different than a lot of other experiences. So I think that kind of communication, I would say like internet interpersonal communication is a big part of it too.
How are they doing video notes? Is it on Loom or?
It's just in Slack, just recording the video thing. That's a 5-minute max. Yeah, that's it.
That's a good idea. Like, I'll see these wall of text messages and it's like, I can't read that. Like, I will not read that. Let's hop on a huddle and talk about it. Like, I just
can't. Yeah. And like, honestly, towards the end of the day, like my brain is trash, honestly. And seeing like a whole bunch of written content, I have to really approach that strategically. And I think that also is a part of a successful employee, is knowing where to set boundaries to throttle learning and understanding that If you can be successful weaving in learning throughout the day, that's good. But I'm a person that I have to sit down for a strategic period of time and block off time and say, like, these are my hours or my half an hour or whatever it is to learn today and ask questions today. Because otherwise it's going to become something that spills over everywhere else and you're not going to be able to be successful and like move that learning forward.
I want to go back to kind of the ads. You say there's like no one like strategy or no one way to do it. Like what are kind of like the pillars of paid ad strategy? Like off the top of my mind as a non-expert, I think of like, driving them to landing pages. I think of like user generated content. I think of, just like images. I think of like high produced content, low produced content. What are kind of like the big frameworks that someone who's really green would need like a good foundational understanding in to start getting a feel for what direction might be the right direction?
I mean, I think right now I'm actually teaching a beginner course for students interested in digital marketing at my alma mater, which is this little tiny school in Minnesota. And the biggest thing that I taught them, and I thought about this for a long time, what do you show people? Because, initially my brain goes to showing the nitty gritty. This is, okay, pull this lever, pull that lever type of thing. And really the biggest thing that I can impart on people is before you do anything else, understand and research the current funnel that's in place or funnels that are in place. Like, what are they currently saying? What are the things that they could say that they are uniquely positioned to say? And where are they going? Like, what's the flow, right? And if you can start to identify that from all parts, from the ads part, from the email part, and you're talking about paid ads, if you can start to look at that holistically, that's going to set you apart from the outset. Because a lot of us were brought up in an era of paid social where you were able to be fairly myopic. You were able to go in and look and say, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to make you $3 more and I can see it in the ROAS on Meta. And now we're in a place where we have to be pushed into looking at the whole funnel. So I think like that's a part of the cornerstone of what it looks like to be successful. I think that if you speak specifically about paid social, it's an understanding of really consumer psychology as a part of what you're doing. So not only understanding trends, but understanding what types of content need to be consistently in your pipeline. And what are what I call, 6-month thinking, right? Like, what are the things that we know Meta's pushing now that as a paid social person, you will want to understand and have it tested or adopted in 6 months? A current example of this in the nerdy sense is Advantage Plus shopping campaigns. Okay, so like we saw that coming. They changed ad credits in a way that allowed us to test them for free from Facebook Shops. And so that's another framework that you want to kind of always be looking ahead and saying, yeah, we've dabbled in it. And if you haven't had access to it, that's hard to know, but at least you're learning about it from other people so that when you do get access, that's part of it. And I think, it's less about the micro audiences that it used to be. It's less about the time frame windows. It's less about, I certainly think some people would disagree that it's about the bidding windows that you use and how you're using cost controls when it comes to paid social. But really, to me, you're green, you're trying to figure it out. It's assessing the whole funnel. It's assessing the sort of the creative matrix that you can get in front of, and also what trends are happening on paid social with creative and how you're going to be building a system of feedback for that over time, alongside landing pages, of course, as well.
What does a system of feedback look like?
Yeah, and this is different for everybody. I mean, I think in some cases, if you're a freelancer or you have a 1 or 2 or 3 person agency, this is going to be some sort of Google sheet where it's, you're just entering in information manually, right? And you're saying, we tested this on this date and this is what it looks like. I think as you start to get bigger, that framework becomes more complex with Notion documents, ClickUp documents, right? Where, steps have to be completed to move on to the next step. So you have to catalog that particular feedback, what happened, what the metrics were that you're looking at, or the creative metrics along with the performance metrics to be able to go through. So it's more systematic. So that's kind of what that system looks like, but it's very much different for everybody. And I think it's an evolving thing as well for most people at this point in time. It's something that I think we've all had to build and get more familiar with, especially in the last year, which is good. Ultimately, it's better for the consumer because we're not just putting out a photo of a white t-shirt anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's challenging. From my perspective, paid is challenging. It's always changing. You're always on your toes. Mm-hmm. iOS a couple of years ago make attribution challenging. how are people successfully attributing their efforts in today's age to make sure they are spending their money on things that are working or not, and pulling away from things that aren't working?
How are people doing that now? It's a big mix, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of schools of thought around it. I think some people would say, we started in a situation where iOS 14 came out, we lost a lot of data, and a third-party tool became an essential part for measurement of what people were doing. And we lost a lot of the data that Meta gave us. So we didn't have any idea. It was all modeled and it was really confusing. Fast forward to where that leads us now is, we have situations where people are still using third-party tools for measurement in a lot of cases, not all cases. And in the cases where they're not, they're feeling more confident in data coming from Meta that's click-based conversion data. And so that is more useful because we didn't have that. That got lost and now it's got brought back again. And you can see that those numbers align with what's happening in a third-party tool more closely. So I think that's helpful for people measuring. So what that looks like for everybody is very different. I think that in our shop, and I think, in anybody that's, you have to tell the story, you're going to look at like a third-party tool, you're going to look at the native platform itself, like Meta, and then you're going to also probably look at Google Analytics to some degree. Now, GA4 is like a hot dumpster fire, so like everybody's figuring that out. So it's like hard to get that, exact, but you're trying to look at three different things to be able to say, this is what I think, this is happening with this. And other people would say, you don't need to do that. You only need to look at Meta. You don't need to look at anything else. And I think that's a good answer too, right? Like I think some people, it depends on what you believe you feel confident in. I'm a person that loves more information than less in reference to this so that I can explain the discrepancies and say like, this is what this is showing, this is what this is showing. Directionally, we see this changing and this is what we're going to do to address that and continue to scale that, or we're going to, pull this back. And it helps me make a decision. But I think this is a continually shifting thing. And I think over time, we'll see more people utilizing platform-only click-based conversion data in terms of measurement, and the other pieces will complement that and back up what's being said there. That would be my guess.
What are the boxes you need to check to be successful on paid social from more of a company standpoint? Like what kind of margin should you have? What kind of like branding should you have? What kind of like, price point should you have? Like, are there any kind of, obviously, I know the answer is always, it depends, but there's going to be some brands that are more conducive to finding success in paid social versus those that maybe find it challenging. What have you seen is more conducive to success?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a huge part of this is product market fit. Where do you sit that's unique is a big part of it. What are you doing that's different than what other people are doing? I mean, just baseline. That's going to be incredibly helpful. I think having right now, and there are, of course, exceptions to this. I always think about, the AOV rule to me is like, I think it's really hard to make paid social work if you're advertising specifically in, let's say, the United States and Canada. If you have an average order value that's lower than $100 or lower than, let's say, $75, like this just, it's so challenging to make that work because the cost per 1,000 impressions is like between 35 and, like hundreds. Like it's really challenging. You might not even be able to show 100 impressions or something, right? So, or 1,000 impressions rather. So that to me is important to point out. And I think that the brand plays into that. I think brand is less important upfront, more important for loyalty. So if you have an established brand, and I see that your emails make people feel special. I see the way that the packaging arrives isn't just a black label on a white package, right? But it feels different and has a differentiating feeling. That's important. So I think the recipe depends on, of course, like you said, it depends on where you're at, what niche you're in. To me, if you look at something like, I have two examples that come up off the top of my head, like skincare is really women's skincare, particularly because there's a lot of people in that world. To stand out among that crowd, you could have an AOV that's $200, and like that's going to be really hard to do, and it's going to be really hard to test with anything under like $10,000 to $20,000 a month because your AOV is so high. You're going to have a hard time getting learnings unless you're playing the retention game. And how are you going to get a brand to stand out in that? And so, you would maybe have some sort of personalization quiz or something that would bring people in. Like that could be a potential, but that's such a longer term game. You look at something like, I recently bought a product that sits in my car that holds my water bottle because my water bottle doesn't fit in the cup holder. It's like shows an ad of this rolling around. This company has no brand. I have no idea what these people do, but they've got to be killing it because it's a differentiated product enough. And I don't see ads. I looked around for other competitors before I found this one and didn't see anything. So it's like, I think there's different mixes. It depends on where you're advertising. It depends on what the margins are. I don't think that's a great answer, but I think you definitely have to have a higher average order value. I think you're also going to be successful if you have some sort of subscription component, of course. I think LTV is a little bit of a myth that can really screw people over, but I also believe that if you have that, that's going to actually build a better business to fuel the prospecting side of it.
So if you don't have, let's say you're selling a $25 product, it's a one product that you don't have that AOV. Do you, instead just sell in different channels? You go to Amazon and that should be your focus and just skip and avoid paid social altogether?
I think if you have a $25 thing, I think it can work. It depends on the uniqueness of the product and the way that it's marketed. I always think about, when I think about this low dollar product, I think of JavaSock, who Fireteam runs. And, it's like a thing that holds your coffee, your iced coffees, right? And like, that's what it is. And because of the creativity and the way that it's marketed, they can be successful because they're selling bundles of it that raises the AOV. And they have a very loyal base because the rest of the whole retention strategy works. If you find somebody that's willing to hustle and you're okay giving away creative control as that testing and learning happens, I do think it can be successful. I think it just depends upon how you're positioning your product, how you're talking about it as a differentiator or like something that's not currently in the marketplace, how much you're talking about the things that are uniquely things you can say and how much, creative is coming into that funnel. And I think if those things are in motion, that can work. I mean, of course, a landing page has to be dialed and things like that too. But I also think, some people say, look, I have a $25 product. I can't make it work. Tried paid social. It's a disaster. Hired an agency. It's a disaster. And there's a bunch of things that could have happened in that. One is, and Amazon might be a good solution for that. That might be something that people are looking for versus wanting, being like, I'm going to see an ad and then think about that. But I think that there could be a number of things that happen. I think if you say that paid social doesn't work and you've tried an agency, if you're part of that equation, generally what happened, there was probably some breakdown in terms of the agency taking the fees and not providing real value or honesty to you about what they needed to be successful. And they may not have known that themselves. Because I think a lot of the people that are there's certainly a segment of our industry that were, like I talked about before, that were built and brought up in this launch an ad and anything will get you a 3X, and it wasn't about true marketing. So you could be stuck in that. So if you find a partner that's willing to hustle, that's willing to try, and I talked to a brand that's in the membership recently, and they've been running their own ads for 6 years. It's a t-shirt brand. They have witty sayings on their t-shirts. And they just found someone who is running the ads for them 3 months ago now, profitable, everything's back up again. And what they did was they just gave the reins to this guy and said, start creating content that you think will work and let's try it. We're open to trying everything. And the owner hadn't given himself that license, but he was open to giving this other gentleman that license. And he started doing that and creating landing pages that had continuity between the two. And now they're profitable. And their AOV is not very high. It's maybe like $65, $70.
I want to talk about the creative side of things. Like, how are people building creative pipelines? Like, obviously, you say you have this person who's running it. Creativity is an important thing to consider when hiring them and their ability to come up with concepts. Are they also responsible for like editing the videos or taking the photographs? Or is it just them communicating with people? Are they working with freelance video editors and photographers? What are you seeing that's successful that has that balance between being able to create content cost effectively, efficiently, and quickly, but also is converting and successful?
I mean, I think that the ultimate mix right now is I think in a reality base, a lot of people aren't going to be able to hire a person to run the ads and also hire a freelancer to do it. So I think in an ideal scenario, you have someone that is taking you from a situation where you don't have any, currently any creative stuff taking place really. And they're testing and they're trying and they're shooting stuff on their iPhone. And maybe like see how that goes as they continue to try to integrate, and maybe they have some video editing skills. So that's like step one. A scenario that I see often, either with someone in-house or an agency, we'll talk about the in-house first, that's successful is, there is someone that is there that is giving direction to the creative freelancers. There might be just, a set of a couple people that are taking a lot of photos and video for them, and they're giving them direction and they're scripting the things that are happening for them and saying, this is what we want to test and this is what it looks like. One of the most requested documents we have in our SOP database on the membership now is basically a shot list template, which is like not something I would have thought we would need. I mean, I never foresaw that, right? Like a few years ago, but now it's incredibly important, right? Because you have to provide direction. You're paying for their time. You need to be as efficient as possible. So typically, if you're looking at an in-house thing, it's going to be that there's somebody that's taking a lot of content, and there's going to be some sort of editor doing video and photo editing and sending things back to you. And, that could be expanded upon with some influencers, depending on what that looks like who those people are, how you're kind of building that up over time, whatever that micro influencer strategy looks like. But that's similar to in an agency you're going to have. In an agency, it's certainly more cost effective because you can share that resource across multiple brands. So that's probably what I see at this point in time.
How do you find an agency that can do creative?
I mean, I think you just ask for their creative portfolio. So if you're speaking to agencies, there are a lot of different ways to go about it. But if you're talking to your network and they say, hey, talk to these people, send me some creative. What do you think, right? Like, send me some of the things that you've produced recently. And you'll know right away if they've done it or not, right? Like, you can always tell when people are fumbling in an answer because they won't send you anything. You can always tell, like, an agency that's really interested should have thoughtful, long answers and say, like, yeah, so here's how we think about creative. Here's how we use the process of creative. And here's some examples of it. And then you can see like what you think about some of them. And then you can ask for related performance metrics of how those have done for those particular clients. Because an agency that's good will have done solid work, and therefore the client will be happy. So they would be able to ask them, like, can I speak to those people, right? And they'd say, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to speak to them. That should be an easy thing. It shouldn't be like a war to get that.
Let's circle back to hiring the in-house talent. Let's say you're not familiar with paid advertising, paid social. What kind of metrics do you set for those team members to ensure that they're being successful? And how do you know, like, certainly someone could be doing a lot of work and not finding success that has learnings in it that will lead to success. How do you know if they're on that pathway towards success or if they're on the pathway towards never going to get it, for lack of...
Yeah, I think the easiest and best way to accomplish this is essentially hiring some sort of a coach for that particular person. I realize that it's not necessarily an option for everybody, but that's something that we do a lot of. That's something that a lot of my colleagues do a lot of is if the brand is going to go in-house, you hire a person to keep that person accountable of saying, tell me how you're feeling about remarketing lately, or tell me your thoughts on what cost caps and the debates kind of around that, right? Because to do it well, you've got to be familiar and updated. So if they're able to answer those things, that's a good way to keep people accountable. If that's not an option, then I think what you can do is you're establishing really metrics and KPIs for them based on the information that you have. Okay, we've put you through, we do courses, right? So this is a common thing we get. Okay, so we put this employee through your courses, so they're able to speak at this level. The ad results have been okay. We're not sure what's missing. So in that sense, then you can have somebody come in, and a lot of agencies will do an audit for free as a way to pitch their services, or people will hire somebody like us to do an audit in the account, right? And we'll look at it and say, here's some of the things we could think about. And if the person is good, they will be like, that's a great idea, right? Because you don't know, right? Like that's how it is. If a person's not going to be successful, they're going to be resistant to that. And they're going to be like, no, I know how to do that. No, I don't want to bring them in. Like, collaboration is always the name of the game in this stuff. And if they're open to that, then ultimately they will be successful because if they have the hunger, and even if you're not hiring somebody, but you're saying you're firing off, a list of tweets or tweet threads that they need to read for $0 every week, that's enough curiosity that should spark in them like, what do you think about that? I'm interested about cost caps. That's fascinating, right? Because if you don't have that fire, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, so really identifying and circling those hunger traits and that growth mindset. You mentioned earlier about hiring a coach. How do you even find a coach? Do you just Google SEO coach or, PPC coach? Is that what people do? Or is it getting into your community and asking around for that?
It's a lot of different ways. This is a question that I yield, let's say, 3 or 4 times a month. And sometimes it's us, sometimes it's, hey, we feel like we're doing good on the buying. We need better help on the creative side. Okay. So, right. I'll connect them with a colleague who's got better skills in that, or I really feel like we need to get better on the overall funnel. Okay. So connecting with them. So it's kind of looking for the people that are industry leaders in that particular area and just saying, hey, sending a cold DM, right, on Twitter, I think is a great way to go about that. I know that, people like David Herman do this a lot. What do you think, Dave? Right? And he's known for that generosity. People do it with people like Zach Stuck a lot. What do you think about this? And it's saying, hey, send it over here. This person might have a better answer for you. So that's really the best way to go about it. I think you certainly could do Google searching on it, and I have no idea what would come up. But I think the best place is to start with, somebody that you vibe with. Well, everybody has different feelings too in this stuff, or different ways to approach it. I think there's sort of the broier side of e-commerce that's going to hustle, and then they don't have kids and can work all the time, right? And if that's your vibe and that's what you're going for, I can connect you to somebody that does that, right? My angle always is look, we're real people doing this to build real careers. Gracie and I, my wife and I, have been running our business for 10 years. We've been doing this. I'm doing this for life, right? I'm not going anywhere. And so that's really my angle, is how do you build in an ad strategy and the things that you're doing to also be able to live your life? So everybody's got a different way to go about it, but you can reach out to the people that I think are inspiring to you, that kind of vibe with you, and they'll be able to connect you with people that have that similar feeling.
You mentioned earlier about the people who work for 2 years on a couple agencies, they find success, and then they want $200,000. How frequent is that? It seems like it's a really competitive marketplace to hire people in these roles. How do you keep people wanting to stay for you? Make sure that they're paid fairly and they're not leaving you and jumping ship every couple of years.
In-house?
Yeah, in-house. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just like anything else. I think there's 2 pieces to this. One is understanding that if you hire ambitious people, there will be a point likely that they will not want to be working with you in-house anymore. And that is just what it is. There's a really great agency that we work with, and they just had 3 employees over the last 6 months that were really their rock stars leave. And I've been coaching this owner for a long time and said, are you okay? How you feeling about this? And he's like, yeah, I'm not an idiot. I did this on purpose. These are people that are going to go do things, and I know that, and that's just what it is for the life cycle. That's one way. I think the other one is you say to the person honestly, look, I want to be ride or die with you on this. I love your thoughts. We're doing really well. I know you could make a lot of money elsewhere. What is it that you, outside of money, and money's certainly part of the equation, but what is it that is also interesting to you? Is that more ownership? Is that having more autonomy? Is that being able to travel and do whatever the hell you want to do? Is that taking every Friday off? I don't know what this is, but understanding and listening to their true desires and making sure that you're designing the role to fit that. I think there's certainly a commonality of living in a fear-based mentality where, if I don't say anything, maybe they'll just stick around, right? Because it's a hard conversation and it's scary. I've done this. And so being able to speak honestly and saying, I'm nervous about you leaving, and I would like to keep you around, knowing you can make money elsewhere. How do we do that? What does that look like? And maybe that looks like you being here for 2 years, but here's what that means for me. And arriving at a mutually agreeable place is really, I think, what that means.
Yeah, I got a funny story. Years ago, I had a wonderful photographer, probably one of the best photographers here in Austin working for us. incredibly talented and everything was going well. And then I talked to her about, getting promoted to become art director. And it was that conversation that catalyzed her to going out on her own. So it was like, I should have, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, there's a quote or something I read on Twitter. It's like, if you have the conversation, you're going to regret not having it. And if you don't have it, you're going to regret that you should have had it. So at a certain point, like, you're not living a double-blind scientific study where you can test both options and see what it would actually
No. And also, like, just in terms of being a good human being, it is like potentially one of the greatest things that you could do for someone to help them create more economical upward mobility for themselves. Like, that's incredible. I mean, if you objectively think about the fact that you created something that's generating enough money for you to live, and you're able to do that for somebody else over time, you do it for multiple people over time. That's amazing. That's actually changing things in the world. So that's also okay. And like, it sucks that they left, yes. But guess what? There's a lot of really hungry people graduating from college that I can promise you are actually smarter than you. This is how I feel lately. I'm teaching these students. I'm like, these kids are like literally like way smarter than me by like a margin of a lot. So that's also good because the life cycle begins anew, So it's an interesting place to be thinking about that.
Speaking of college, do you go to like college campuses and try to recruit people there, or is that what people are doing? How do you find the best of the college kids?
There's a whole bunch of different ways people have gone about this. Some of it, the agency I was talking about earlier that they had, 3 rock stars, they went and hired basically a person that knew the US East Coast job fair scene really well. That was a consultant and used to work for like Deloitte or something and would go to these Ivy Leagues. And hired this person to go in and have booths at career fairs and said, look, we'll give you the same salary that Goldman's going to give you or whatever, but you just get to come in and run ads. And the economic bet was that they will pay for themselves. Well, he's been right. I mean, these people that work for him are absurdly smart. Clearly, not everyone is doing this. I think to me, it's looking at most people that are successful, if you're hiring kind of slowly in a thoughtful way, you're going into your pre-existing network and saying, let's see, where can I go to my alma mater and talk to people? Where can I go to, let's just say there's a startup hub in like almost every city now, at least one in the United States. So where can I go to find people that are there working on something? Hey, that's interesting. Do you want to come in? I found Shane Cicero, who's my colleague. He's worked with me for almost 8 years now. One of my closest friends. He was at a local Madison, Wisconsin networking event where I met him, and he had gotten a social media certificate from the technical college. So like it's, going out, and I don't think you have to have some huge strategy about it. I mean, if you go to places that are places you would be and good people are around and you start asking enough questions, and especially if you don't mind if the person has no experience, you're going to find some good people, I think.
Where can people support you, follow you, find you, buy your courses?
Yeah, just foxwelldigital.com is where everything is at. Our community is at foxwelldigital.com/membership. And our courses are on there as well. You can email me anytime, Andrew@foxwelldigital.com, and I'm on Twitter too. So I look forward to hearing from you if you need help on anything or any of these pieces of the journey. But yeah, man, it's an honor to speak with you.
Sweet, man. Well, it's been great to have you on E-Commerce Conversations. I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much and were able to pick up a couple of nuggets here or there, a couple of takeaways. As always, this has been another E-Commerce Conversations. Cheers. And keep on growing.